welcome back to my channel. My name is Tina and today is in time for another one of my makeup and murder series. This is True Crime Sunday. Today we're going to be talking about Clemintine Barnabet. She is the first known Black serial killer. If you're concerned about graphic content, this probably isn't the video for you. For those of you who love true crime, this one is gonna blow your mind. Let's talk about my makeup look. There's gonna be a couple inspiration pics. I'm gonna do my eyes first because as you can see, this is a very dark look. Let's jump into this. So I'm gonna be priming my eyes with my Elizabeth Mott eye primer. Then I'm gonna be using multiple palettes for this look. So I have my Clover palette, my Modern Renaissance palette, and then my Juvia's Place Festival palette. I also have some ColourPop Super Shock shadows here. So we're gonna start off with my eye look. Clemintine Barnabet, first known Black serial killer. She was only a teenager. They don't have an exact age. She was somewhere between 17 and 19 years old. She grew up with her mom and dad. You're gonna be hearing more about the dad and the brother. I don't know how I've never heard of this crime before. For those of you who are true crime buffs, let me know if you too are like, what the heck? If you live in Louisiana, you very well probably have heard of this. So this could be a longer video. This case has a lot to it. So Clementine was born presumably around 1894 in St. Martinsville, Louisiana. They later moved to Lafayette, Louisiana with her mom and dad, Nina and Raymond Barnabet. As usual, Raymond Barnabet was well known to be a very mean, violent person. So now that my eyes are set, I'm gonna use my Modern Renaissance palette and I'm gonna start off with the base shade. So he was known as your typical mean father person. This was right after the Civil War. There were still a lot of problems. It was not a good time for people of color. Let's just say she grew up in a really violent and poor area of the world and didn't have a lot of chances. This all started on November 11th, 1909 on a Saturday night in Rayne, Louisiana. A Black family was killed. It was a woman and her children. They were killed with an axe, brutally killed. The police went out, looked at it, but they didn't do much about it. At that time, that wasn't terribly uncommon. I just am using my Smashbox Trio and I'm gonna use these two colors here to start filling in this outside edge and building up to that really dark color that you see. Black crime at the time was pretty much, the sheriff would come out, look around, and if he couldn't figure out who did it real quick, they pretty much just went, whatever, and left. All of these crimes happened in extremely poor areas. Not a lot of attention was given. And sadly, even today, that's kind of true. Cases get way more resources put into them, and those typically are cases where people have more money. Now I'm gonna use that dark plum and deepen up this outside corner. So her and her kids were killed. They couldn't figure out what had happened, and they pretty much didn't try very hard. They went out, they looked around, they didn't see anything. There was no husband to blame. They did blame this one guy for a little bit and thought he'd done it, but as is the case with serial killers, more murders started happening. So the first one of these happened in September, and then the next one happened in November, and they were both killed the same way. Their newspapers, when they finally started talking about these cases, referred to them as being brained with an axe. Both of these families were killed, and everybody in the house was killed. It wasn't just one person, it was everybody. And they would break in, and they weren't quite sure how they were breaking in. There wasn't like a forced entry or anything. They weren't even sure if the axe on scene was used or somebody brought one with them. In January, which is a couple months later, again, in 1911, in Crowley, Louisiana, Walter Byers, his wife, and his son were all again killed with an axe. And at this point, the Black community is going a little bit crazy. They want answers about what's going on here. So I'm gonna take Love Letter and just start building up. Every single newspaper article I read had a different one, and some included murders that others didn't. There were some of these, they don't even know the names of the family. They just know that they were killed. They don't even know who it was. That is scary. I can't imagine how terrified people in this area of the world were at that time, because the whole family would just be wiped out. There was no robbery, there was no reason for it. After the Byers family is killed, then in February on the 25th, the Anders family is murdered in Lafayette, Louisiana. Timmy and Mimi, a 3-year-old an 11th-month-old. They weren't just murdered, they were posed. They had come in, they had murdered them, and then they propped the mom and dad up like they were kneeling beside the bed and put the baby in the center of them like they were praying. Really weird. That, of course, got everybody's attention. So now they start looking. They find Raymond Barnabet. So now I'm going to take Daddy Loves Me, sort of come in a little bit. During his trial, people were pretty convinced that he had done it. They had witnesses that said they'd seen a man at the scene. He was well known for being super violent. And then with his own family testifying against him, you know, it's kind of a lock. I'm going to take Woof, this black, and I'm just going to build up my crease. And then I'm just going to go back and start blending around that. I'm going to take the Festival palette and this really bright red. So she testifies, everybody believes her, that her father had committed these murders. Now, I think they believe her because in part she's telling the truth. I think there's more to this than they understood at the time, just because we know more about these type of behaviors now. She goes to court, she testifies, and she does an excellent job testifying. They convict her father of the murders, and he's sentenced to hang. So he's convicted in October, and then a month later, another murder happens. Exactly the same MO. They break in, they're all killed with an axe. The whole family is wiped out. And this murder, though, we're going backwards, they're not posed. In some of the murders, they're being posed, in others, they're not. But Raymond's locked up, so he can't be the murderer of this family. At this point, the authorities, they think there's something going on with this family that's kind of weird. I'm gonna take this Dirty Little Secret single in Sangra and start getting some glitter on my lid in the center of it. And we're gonna clean this all up. The whole Randall family, a mom, a dad, and then 2 kids and a nephew who were all killed. They had a daughter who came home and found the body, who raised the alarm. At this point, the police are like, what the heck? They go search the Barnabet home, and in the home they find Clementine's bloody clothing. She had done nothing to clean them or anything. They were covered in brain and disgusting, right? They're like, aha, she did it. So they arrest her. I'm gonna take this ColourPop color. These perform best if you use your fingers. Pat them across my lid. So that's a total mess. I'm gonna clean that up and I'll be right back. Start doing my foundation. I'm gonna use the Elizabeth Mott Thank Me Later primer. So she's on trial and she takes the stand. At that time, laws were very different. So I'm going to use this under eye primer, and then I'm going to use my MAC Studio Sculpt and my Wet n Wild Photo Focus and combine those together. So I'm actually going to read you the testimony of somebody who witnessed the trial, what was said in the newspapers that she confessed to. I actually found her actual confession, and this meshes up pretty well with that. It's just a little more dramatic and a little pared down. With screams of hysterical laughter, the girl rocked back and forth in the witness chair, her great eyes rolling into the back of her head, barely any pupils showing. Amidst sharp commands from the court and quick questions from the prosecutor, the woman told how, because the Randall family had refused to obey church commands, she had crept into their cabin late on Sunday night with a keen-edged axe concealed in the folds of her cotton wrapper. She told how after she had thrown open the door of the tiny cabin, she crept upon the sleeping husband and wife, and before either of them could rouse, had split their skulls in twain with her death-dealing implement. She told how 4 children on the floor started to cry, and how stealthily tread she approached their trundle bed and swinging killed 2 with 1 blow and lay about the other with quick hacking motions until they were scattered in bits about the cabin. As she completed her awful tale, she rocked to and fro and said, "And Judge, that ain't all either." The girl continued to tell of how when a family by the name of Andrews, living in the isolated section of the parish near the Mississippi River, had refused to obey the message from God, supposed to be the utterings of a voodoo doctor who had been seen in the district, she had, after a religiously crazed frantics, went to the Anders cabin in the dead of night, and there with axes hacked the sleeping members, 4 in number, into pieces, ending their bloody orgy with weird prayers and incantations. Her actual statement wasn't quite like that, but she did confess to everything. She said that they had committed these crimes because they belonged to the Church of Sacrifice. But here's the thing, when you really start reading the newspapers and what little of the police reports I could get, they're not entirely sure it was called the Church of Sacrifice or the Church of the Sanctified. This made the newspapers at the time go crazy. This was a voodoo murders because she had talked about a hoodoo, which is that protects you, and she had said that the hoodoo she got was supposed to protect them from anything. It was supposed to conceal them no matter what they did. And so they had decided to try to commit murder and see if they could get away with it. And they did so, and they got away with it. They committed more murders because they decided that through these murders, they could become immortal. So I'm going to contour using my Wet Wild contour stick. After this trial, everybody's now convinced that this whole thing is all done. And she confessed to committing the murders that she had got her dad convicted of. She confessed to 17 murders total that she herself did. And this gets her dad, he's no longer on death row. So now I'm going to use my Tarte Shape Tape Concealer. The newspapers go completely crazy. They've got these voodoo murders, except for the fact that she's not really into voodoo. It wasn't uncommon to go see that type of person at that time. Hoodoos, which are like little sachets, they're like little spells, they were really common at the time. And for a while, they actually blamed everything on this voodoo doctor who was well-known, well-respected. You know, he wasn't out hurting anybody. All this is going on, right? So she's convicted to life on October 25th of 1912. Should be the end of all the murders, right? It's not. So she's convicted. Why do I have different dates here? I use different sources, so I have different dates. This one says November 29th, 1911. She was convicted. We know that afterward, January 20th, 1912, the Bessard family is killed. The whole family, again, killed with an axe. And they're not just killed, they're also posed. The children's hands are splayed apart with string between them. And there's this weird writing on the wall called the Human Five. And then there's a Bible saying, also written in really good handwriting. So the biblical passage written on the wall is Psalms 9, when he maketh the inquisition for blood, he forgetteth not the cry of the humble. Because at this point, she's in jail, so she can't have committed these murders. Well, this time, the police go after her brother and bring him in as well. So now, basically, the entire Barnabet family is in jail. While on the witness stand, Clementine had said there were others marked for death. And murders still keep happening. 35 of them. And Clementine takes responsibility for all of them. I'm going to take Bon Fresco first, and I'm going to start coming around this outside edge. And then I'm going to take Love Letter, put that under here as well. I'm going to take some NYX glitter glue and put that in the center of my lid. I'm going to come all the way in with it. The Color Pop, and I'm just going to put that over the top right here. Oh yeah, that doesn't make it shinier. I have this blank palette, and I'll show you a picture of it. So I'm going to use the red that's in here and just pat that on over the top of that just to give it that really shiny red look that I'm seeing in the pictures. I'm going to take the Modern Renaissance palette and use Verbena, which is this really beautiful shimmer right here. And I'm just going to put that on my inner corner, and then I will blend that. And for blush, I'm going to use B and Sola out of my Juvia's Place Saharan 2 blush palette. So after all this happens, and they have everybody in jail, at this point you really would think the murders would stop. They don't. They keep going for several more months. But without the ritualistic aspect to it, it's no longer there. They're just being slaughtered with an axe, and it's the whole family's wiped out. Now, this does stay in the news a bit, and they talk about voodoo murders. So they stop a few months after that. And then about 6 years later, they start up again. And these murders, the axe murders of Louisiana, are actually pretty well known. I'm going to take Pirates of the Caribbean face set, and I'm going to use Destined for highlight. And now I'm going to use my Brow Gal brow gel. I can't do my brows and talk at the same time. So I'm going to use my Smashbox Lash Primer and then curl my lashes. I just followed the Clementine part of it. I mean, it was just amazing to me that this happened, and I'd never even heard of it. The murders 6 years later happened. As far as I know, those were unsolved. She sort of taken claim of them. I don't know that anybody believed her though, except for maybe the newspapers who, like to play it up. 10 years later, after her conviction, they do a corrective surgery. They did a frontal lobe lobotomy. Unfortunately, this was a thing that happened. It was horrendous. After this, they pronounced her cured and let her go. As far as I know, no more axe murders happened after she was released. So I'm gonna use my cat suit and I'm just gonna line my lash line. There is one report in a newspaper where this woman thinks that maybe her grandmother was Clemintine Barnabet. Nobody knows for sure. So I'm going to use my Smashbox Always On liquid lipstick. And then I'm going to use my Too Faced setting powder. And we're going to talk about what I think happened here. I have no doubt that she was guilty of some of these murders. I don't think she acted alone in any way, shape, or form. I think this was a group murder. And the police were probably correct. It was probably mainly her family. A lot of times when you see murders where some of them are ritualistic, some of them are disorganized, those are usually more than one person killing. We know that family murders in families, it does happen. We've talked about the Bloody Benders before. She was a psychopath. I think she was a disorganized killer. So she just went in and killed people, and she had her religious reasons for doing so. I don't necessarily think they had a dang thing to do with voodoo exactly. I just think that this was something they came up with and it became a thing for them. I have a feeling that her brother is the one who was the organized killer. So he would pose the bodies, or somebody they didn't catch, because organized killers tend to be more intelligent. If somebody was there with a high IQ, it wouldn't have been very hard. They actually got away with it. The handwriting on the wall, as I said, was extremely legible. They could read every word, no problem. At that time, that would have been unusual for somebody in that area of town. I have a feeling that that person either never got caught or was her brother. It sounds like they all got mixed up in this cult type thinking. That's pretty much my completed look. And that is my thoughts on this murder. There's a lot here. So let me know what you thought, and if you've heard of this case, especially if you're from Louisiana. I know that people from there tend to follow these cases pretty heavily, which is awesome. Thank you so much for watching the series. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!